The arrogant princess, the transport shuttle glided silently through the void toward Prometheus Station, humanity's premier military training facility orbiting Earth's moon. Inside the gleaming vessel, Princess Zara Kethai of the ethereal Dominion sat in perfect posture, her pale blue skin almost luminescent against the stark white of her ceremonial robes. Her silver hair cascaded down her back like liquid mercury, and her violet eyes held the cold disdain of someone who had never been told no in her 19 years of existence. Zara possessed the typical ethereal features that made her people consider themselves the pinnacle of galactic evolution. Tall and graceful, with elongated limbs and an otherworldly beauty, she carried herself with the confidence of someone born to rule. More importantly, she possessed what her people called the sight, psychic abilities that allowed her to read emotions, project thoughts, and manipulate objects with her mind. To her, humans were nothing more than primitive barbarians who had somehow stumbled into space travel. As the station grew larger in the viewport, Zara couldn't help but sneer at its utilitarian design. Where ethereal structures flowed like living art, human constructions were blocky and purely functional. The station bristled with weapons and armor plating, a monument to humanity's apparently violent nature. She was here only because the ethereal High Council had deemed it politically necessary to understand these crude beings who had somehow become major players in galactic affairs. The shuttle docked with a mechanical clang that made Zara wince. She was accustomed to the silent, gravity-defying technology of her people. Everything about this place seemed designed to offend her refined sensibilities. When the airlock cycled open, she was greeted by a human male in military dress uniform. Princess Kethai, welcome to Prometheus Station. I'm Commander Harrison, the station's commanding officer. The middle-aged human's voice was respectful, but not subservient, which immediately irritated Zara. Commander, she replied with a slight nod that barely qualified as acknowledgement. She didn't extend her hand, considering physical contact with humans distasteful. Your liaison will be Sergeant Morrison. He'll be responsible for your education in human military doctrine and will accompany you throughout your stay. Commander. Harrison gestured to another human who stepped forward from the shadows. Sergeant Jake Morrison was everything Zara expected from a human soldier, and somehow worse. He stood just over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and a muscular frame that spoke of physical training rather than the mental disciplines her people valued. His dark hair was cut short in military fashion, and his brown eyes held an intensity that made her unconsciously take a step back. Most disturbing of all, she couldn't read his emotions clearly. Where most humans were open books to her psychic abilities, Morrison's mind felt like trying to peer through muddy water. Princess, Morrison said simply, his voice carrying a gravelly quality that suggested years of shouting orders. He didn't bow or show any of the deference she was accustomed to receiving. Sergeant Morrison, she replied coolly, allowing her displeasure to color her voice. I trust you understand the honor of being assigned to someone of my station. Morrison's expression didn't change, but she caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Amusement. That was impossible. No one found her amusing. Ma'am, I understand. You're here to learn about human military methods. I'll do my best to teach you what you need to know. His tone was professional but lacked the reverence she expected. Commander Harrison cleared his throat. Sergeant Morrison is one of our finest instructors. He's trained soldiers from 17 different species and has commendations for excellence in cross-cultural military education. Zara barely listened. The idea that this primitive creature could teach her anything was laughable. Her people had been masters of warfare when humans were still discovering fire. Their psychic abilities allowed for forms of combat these brutes couldn't even comprehend. I'm sure the sergeant is adequate for his usual students, Zara said dismissively. However, I should inform you that my standards are considerably higher than what you might be accustomed to. Morrison's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I see. Well, Princess, let's start with a tour of the facilities and then we'll see what those standards really mean. As they walked through the station's corridors, Zara made no effort to hide her disdain. She criticized everything from the harsh lighting to the cramped quarters, comparing each aspect unfavorably to ethereal technology. Morrison answered her questions with professional courtesy, But she could sense his growing irritation despite his mental shields. They entered the main training bay, a massive space filled with human soldiers engaged in various exercises. The sight of sweating, grunting humans throwing themselves around in what they called physical training disgusted Zara. Her people maintained their physical forms through meditation and psychic energy manipulation. "This is where we conduct basic combat training," Morrison explained. "Physical fitness is the foundation of military effectiveness." Zara watched a group of soldiers struggling through what appeared to be an obstacle course. "How primitive. My people abandoned such crude methods centuries ago. Mental discipline and psychic control make this sort of thing obsolete." "Is that so?" Morrison's tone remained neutral, but there was something in his posture that suggested challenge. "Would you care to demonstrate these superior methods?" The invitation was exactly what Zara had been hoping for. Here was her chance to show these humans how outclassed they truly were. "Very well, Sergeant. I suppose a demonstration might be educational for your people." Morrison called over a young human soldier. "Private Chen, would you volunteer for a sparring demonstration with the princess?" The soldier, barely older than Zara herself, looked nervous but nodded. "Yes, Sergeant." Zara stepped into the training circle with fluid grace. She didn't bother with any of the protective gear the humans insisted on wearing. As Private Chen approached cautiously, she reached out with her mind and simply pushed. The soldier flew backward several feet, landing hard on the padded floor. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the training bay as other soldiers stopped to watch. "As you can see," Zara said with smug satisfaction, "physical strength means nothing against mental superiority." Morrison helped Private Chen to his feet, checking to make sure he wasn't injured. "Impressive," he said quietly. "Now let's see how that works against someone who knows what to expect." Before Zara could react, Morrison moved. He didn't charge, straight at her like Chen had done. Instead, he circled her carefully, staying just outside what he somehow knew was the range of her psychic abilities. When she tried to push him, he was already moving, rolling to the side and coming up in a different position. Frustrated, Zara reached deeper into her powers, attempting to freeze him in place with a mental grip. For a moment, Morrison slowed, his face showing strain, but then he did something completely unexpected. He smiled. "Interesting technique, Princess, but you're broadcasting your intentions like a radio signal." Morrison took a step forward, somehow pushing through her psychic hold. "The problem with relying on one method is that eventually, you'll meet someone who's figured out how to counter." Panic flashed through Zara as Morrison continued his advance. She tried to read his mind, to anticipate his next move, but his thoughts remained frustratingly opaque. When she attempted to project fear or confusion into his mind, the emotions seemed to slide off him like water off a shield. Morrison reached out and gently but firmly grasped her wrist. "Combat over, Princess." The training bay erupted in cheers and applause from the human soldiers. Zara stood frozen, not from psychic power, but from shock. No one had ever bested her before. No one had ever even come close. "How?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Mental discipline works both ways," Morrison replied, releasing her wrist. "You're not the first psychic species we've encountered. We've learned a few things about defending ourselves." For the first time in her life, Zara felt truly small. The humans around her weren't looking at her with the awe and fear she was accustomed to. They were looking at her with something worse: pity. "This demonstration is concluded," she announced, trying to maintain her dignity. "I require rest to recover from the journey." Morrison nodded. "Of course. Private Davis will show you to your quarters. We'll resume training tomorrow at 0800 hours. As Zara followed the assigned soldier out of the training bay, she could hear the humans talking excitedly about what they had witnessed. Words like "showed her" and "about time" reached her ears, making her face burn with humiliation. In her assigned quarters, which were Spartan compared to her palace chambers, Zara sat on the simple bed and tried to process what had happened. She had been defeated by a primitive human using nothing but training and discipline. It was impossible. It was humiliating, it was also intriguing. Despite her wounded pride, Zara found herself curious about Morrison's methods. How had he resisted her psychic abilities? How had he known exactly where to position himself? Her tutors had always taught her that ethereals were naturally superior to all other species, but Morrison had just proven that assumption wrong. As she prepared for sleep, Zara made a decision. She would show these humans that her defeat had been a fluke. Tomorrow she would demonstrate her true capabilities and put Sergeant Morrison in his place. She was Princess Zara Kethai of the Ethereal Dominion, and no human would make her look foolish again. But deep in her mind, a small voice wondered if perhaps there was more to these humans than she had initially believed. Morrison's confident smile and the ease with which he had countered her abilities suggested that humanity might have depths she had never considered. The thought both terrified and excited her in ways she didn't yet understand. The lesson learned. The next morning arrived with the harsh chime of the station's artificial dawn cycle. Zara woke feeling disoriented and irritated. The human concept of rigid time schedules offended her ethereal sensibilities. Her people rose when their bodies felt ready, guided by natural rhythms and psychic energy flows. This mechanical precision felt like imprisonment. She dressed in her ceremonial robes again, a deliberate choice to remind everyone of her status and superiority. When she arrived at the designated meeting point, she found Morrison waiting with several other human soldiers. Unlike yesterday, his expression was stern, almost cold. "You're 12 minutes late, Princess," Morrison said without preamble. I'm not accustomed to being rushed like some common soldier," Zara replied haughtily. "My people understand that true readiness cannot be forced by artificial schedules." Morrison studied her for a long moment. "I see. And what happens when the enemy attacks before you feel ready?" The question caught Zara off guard. In ethereal society, conflicts were carefully orchestrated affairs with formal challenges and agreed-upon conditions. The idea of surprise attacks was considered barbaric. "Civilized beings don't resort to such crude tactics," she said dismissively. "Tell that to the Korthak raiders who hit the mining colony on Kepler 442 last month," Morrison replied grimly. "They didn't wait for an appointment. 37 civilians died because they weren't ready." Something in Morrison's tone made Zara pause. She reached out with her psychic abilities and caught an echo of genuine pain from him. The loss of life wasn't just a statistic to this human. It was personal. "Today we're going to run a combat simulation," Morrison continued, leading them into a massive holographic chamber. "Your objective is to defend a civilian transport from hostile forces. You'll be working with a team of 4 soldiers." Zara looked at the humans assigned to her team. They were young, probably new recruits given the honor of working with alien royalty. She could sense their nervousness and excitement. It would be easy to take control and show them how real warriors fought. "I assume I'll be in command?" Zara asked, though it wasn't really a question. "Negative. Corporal Jackson will be team leader. You're there to observe and learn." Morrison's tone brooked no argument. The simulation began with their team positioned aboard a civilian transport under attack by pirates. The scenario was complex, with multiple objectives and time constraints. Zara quickly grew frustrated as Corporal Jackson issued orders she considered inefficient and crude. When Jackson ordered the team to take defensive positions behind makeshift barriers, Zara ignored the command. Instead, she stepped into the open and reached out with her mind, attempting to psychically overwhelm the attacking holograms. Her powers worked initially, sending several holographic pirates flying. But as she focused on her psychic assault, she failed to notice a flanking maneuver by other attackers. Virtual gunfire erupted around her, and warning lights flashed as the simulation registered multiple hits to her position. "Kethai, get to cover," Jackson shouted. Zara whirled around, preparing to unleash her full psychic power, but Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. Simulation pause. The holographic environment froze, leaving Zara standing exposed in the middle of what would have been a killing field. Morrison approached her, his expression unreadable. "What did you learn from that exercise, Princess?" "That your simulations are poorly designed," Zara snapped. In real combat, I would have sensed those flanking attackers long before they could threaten me. Would you? Morrison gestured to the frozen holograms surrounding her position. Because, according to the simulation's readings, you were so focused on your psychic attacks that your situational awareness dropped to near zero. You didn't notice when Corporal Jackson called for retreat, and you exposed your entire team to enemy fire. Zara felt heat rise in her cheeks. I was demonstrating superior combat techniques. Your primitive firearms are no match for psychic abilities. Morrison's jaw tightened. Restart simulation. Current scenario position. The holograms came to life again, immediately opening fire on Zara's exposed position. This time she couldn't dodge fast enough. Warning lights blazed as the system registered fatal hits, and the simulation ended with a harsh buzzer indicating mission failure. Simulation results, Morrison announced to the assembled team. Civilian casualties, 47. Military casualties, 5, including Princess HFY. Mission status, complete failure. The numbers hit Zara like a physical blow. In her arrogance, she had gotten herself and an entire team killed, along with dozens of innocent civilians. The young soldiers on her team looked at her with expressions ranging from disappointment to barely concealed anger. Those numbers represent real people, Princess, Morrison said quietly. Real families, real lives lost because of poor decision-making and failure to work as part of a team. For the first time, Zara felt something she had never experienced before. Genuine shame. Her psychic abilities allowed her to sense the emotions of the soldiers around her, and their disappointment cut deeper than any physical wound. I was attempting to end the threat quickly, she stammered. By abandoning your team and ignoring your commander's orders, Morrison replied. In human military doctrine, that's called insubordination, and it gets people killed. The word hit Zara like a slap. In ethereal society, her royal status meant her decisions were always correct by definition. The concept of being subordinate to anyone was alien to her. How dare you? She hissed, her psychic powers flaring with her anger. I am Princess Zara HFY. I do not take orders from primitive humans. Morrison stepped closer, seemingly unaffected by her psychic display. Right now you're a student in my training program, and students who endanger their teammates face consequences. Before Zara could react, Morrison moved with swift efficiency. He guided her to a nearby bench and, to her absolute shock, pulled her across his lap. The first firm swat to her rear sent waves of disbelief through her mind. What are you doing? She gasped, struggling against his grip. Teaching you about consequences, Morrison replied calmly, delivering several more measured swats, something your upbringing apparently missed. The physical discipline was shocking enough, but what truly stunned Zara was her inability to stop it. Her psychic powers seemed to slide off Morrison's determined mind like water off stone. For the first time in her life, she was completely powerless. The spanking wasn't cruel or excessive, but it was thorough and humiliating. When Morrison finally set her back on her feet, Zara stood in stunned silence, her face burning with embarrassment. The human soldiers had watched the entire proceedings with expressions of surprise and grudging approval. In the human military, Morrison said evenly, actions have consequences. When those actions endanger lives, those consequences are swift and certain. Do you understand? Zara's mouth opened and closed without sound. No one had ever dared treat her this way. No one had ever made her face real consequences for her actions. The shock was overwhelming. Before she could formulate a response, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed as the emergency broadcast system activated. All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. Unknown vessels have breached the outer perimeter. All personnel to battle stations. Morrison's demeanor shifted instantly from instructor to combat veteran. Princess, you need to get to the secured civilian areas. No, Zara said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. If this is real combat, then I want to help. Morrison studied her for a moment, perhaps seeing something different in her expression. Can you follow orders? The question hung in the air between them. Zara thought about the failed simulation, about the lives lost due to her arrogance. She thought about Morrison's lesson in consequences and the strange new feeling of accountability growing in her chest. "Yes," she said simply. Morrison nodded curtly. "Jackson, get the princess a helmet and body armor. We're moving out." As they rushed through the station's corridors, Zara found herself staying close to Morrison and listening carefully to his instructions. The attacking force turned out to be Korthak raiders, the same species Morrison had mentioned earlier. Their ships were sleek and deadly, designed for quick strikes against civilian targets. "They're after the research data in Laboratory 7, Morrison explained as they took positions in a defensive corridor. "New shield technology that could revolutionize space combat." Zara reached out with her psychic abilities, probing for the raiders' emotions and intentions. What she found surprised her. The Korthak weren't mindless savages. They were disciplined, professional soldiers following a careful plan. "Sergeant," she said urgently, "they have teams moving through sections C and E as well. This is a coordinated assault, not a simple raid." Morrison looked at her sharply. "Can you track their movements?" Zara nodded, extending her mental reach further. 3 teams. The main force is hitting the laboratory as a distraction. The real objective is the communication center. They want to cut off our ability to call for reinforcements. For a moment, Morrison's mental shields dropped, and Zara caught a flash of his thoughts. He was impressed by her tactical analysis and her willingness to use her abilities to help rather than show off. "Change of plans," Morrison announced to the team. "We're moving to protect the comm center. Princess, I need you to keep tracking their positions." Working together, the human soldiers and Zara moved through the station with unprecedented coordination. Her psychic abilities provided intelligence while Morrison's tactical expertise guided their responses. For the first time, Zara understood what it meant to be part of a team rather than its self-appointed leader. The battle was fierce but brief. The combination of human military precision and ethereal psychic abilities proved devastatingly effective. When the last raider was neutralized, Zara found herself breathing hard and exhilarated in a way she had never experienced. "Excellent work, Princess," Morrison said, and the approval in his voice made something warm bloom in Zara's chest. As they walked back through the station, Zara reflected on everything that had happened. The discipline Morrison had administered still stung her pride, but she was beginning to understand its purpose. For the first time in her life, someone had held her accountable for her actions and their consequences. "Sergeant," she said quietly, "I owe you an apology." Morrison glanced at her, surprise flickering across his features. "For what?" "For my behavior. For endangering the team in the simulation. For thinking I was above learning from you." The words came slowly, each one a struggle against her ingrained sense of superiority. Morrison stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "Apology accepted, Princess. But more importantly, what did you learn?" Zara considered the question carefully. "That true strength isn't about individual power. It's about working together, about being accountable for your actions, and about putting the mission and the team above your own ego." Morrison smiled, and this time, it wasn't the confident challenge from before. It was something warmer, something that spoke of respect earned and lessons learned. "Now you're starting to understand what it means to be a soldier," he said. The bond forged 3 weeks had passed since the Korthak raid, and Prometheus Station had settled back into its routine training schedule. But for Zara, everything had changed. The arrogant princess who had arrived with disdain for human methods was gone, replaced by someone who genuinely wanted to learn and grow. She now arrived at training sessions early, dressed in practical military fatigues rather than ceremonial robes. Her silver hair was pulled back in a functional ponytail, and she carried herself with the bearing of a soldier rather than royalty. Most importantly, she listened to Morrison's instructions with respectful attention instead of dismissive arrogance. "Your improvement has been remarkable, Princess," Morrison said as they concluded a particularly challenging tactical exercise. Your psychic abilities combined with proper military discipline make you a formidable asset. Zara felt a warm glow at his praise. Over the past weeks, she had come to understand that Morrison's approval wasn't given lightly. Every compliment was earned through hard work and demonstrated competence. "I had an excellent teacher," she replied, and meant it sincerely. Morrison's expression softened slightly. "You had the willingness to learn. That's what made the difference." As they walked through the station's corridors, Zara reflected on how much her perspective had changed. The utilitarian design she had once scorned now seemed practical and efficient. The discipline she had once considered restrictive now felt like a framework for excellence. Most importantly, the humans she had once dismissed as primitive now commanded her genuine respect. "Sergeant Morrison," she said carefully, "may I ask you something personal?" Morrison glanced at her with curiosity. "Go ahead." "Why did you resist my psychic abilities so easily that first day? I've encountered other species with mental defenses, but yours was different." Morrison was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Mental discipline isn't just about blocking psychic attacks. It's about understanding yourself completely, accepting your strengths and weaknesses, and maintaining focus regardless of external pressure. He paused at a viewport showing the stars beyond the station. "Humans have survived and thrived because we've learned to adapt, to overcome obstacles through determination and ingenuity. Your psychic powers are impressive, but they're still just tools. The mind that wields them is what matters." Zara studied his profile as he gazed out at the stars. "My people believe that psychic ability makes us inherently superior to other species. But you've shown me that belief was limited." "Different doesn't mean inferior or superior," Morrison replied. "It just means different. Humans excel at cooperation, adaptation, and refusing to give up when things get difficult. Ethereals have incredible individual capabilities and sophisticated culture. Both have value." Before Zara could respond, their communicators chirped with an urgent message. "All senior personnel report to the briefing room immediately. Priority Alpha." Commander Harrison's face was grim when they assembled in the briefing room. "We've received a distress call from the research vessel Endeavour. They were investigating anomalous readings in the Deneb system when they came under attack by an unknown force. The holographic display showed the sleek lines of a deep space research vessel, surrounded by strange, organic-looking ships that seemed to shift and flow like living creatures." "What's their status?" Morrison asked. "Trapped in a gravity well created by the attackers. Their engines are disabled and their shields are failing. They have approximately 6 hours before their life support fails completely." Zara stared at the organic ships in fascination and growing dread. "Those aren't Korthic raiders or any known species. The biosignatures are completely alien. Which is why we need someone with psychic abilities to help establish communication," Harrison said, looking directly at Zara. "Princess, we're requesting your assistance in a rescue mission." The weight of the request settled on Zara's shoulders. This wasn't a training exercise or a diplomatic formality. Lives hung in the balance, and they were asking her to help because of her unique capabilities. "I'll need to work closely with Sergeant Morrison," she said without hesitation. "His tactical expertise will be essential." Harrison nodded. "Agreed. You'll both be attached to the rescue team aboard the cruiser Valiant. Departure in 30 minutes. As they prepared for the mission, Zara found herself nervous in a way she had never experienced before. Previous challenges had been matters of pride or personal achievement. This was about saving lives, about proving worthy of the trust being placed in her. "Princess," Morrison said as they boarded the rescue ship, "you'll do fine. Trust your training and trust your team." The Valiant was a fast attack cruiser designed for rapid response missions. As they traveled toward the Deneb system, Zara worked with the ship's communications officer to prepare for potential psychic contact with the unknown attackers. "The key is not to project human or ethereal thought patterns," she explained to Morrison as they studied the tactical displays. "If these beings are truly alien, their mental architecture could be completely different from anything we've encountered." When they dropped out of hyperspace near the Endeavour, the scene was worse than the distress call had indicated. The research vessel was completely encased in what appeared to be a web of organic material that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. The alien ships moved around it like predatory creatures protecting their catch. "My God," whispered the Valiant's captain. "What are those things?" Zara reached out with her psychic abilities, trying to probe the alien minds. What she found made her recoil in shock. The beings weren't malevolent, but their thought processes were so alien that human concepts like communication or negotiation seemed meaningless. "They're not attacking out of hostility," she reported urgently. "They think they're helping. In their understanding, they're preserving the humans by encasing them in what they consider a protective matrix." Morrison absorbed this information quickly. "So we're dealing with a misunderstanding rather than an attack. Can you communicate with them?" Zara tried again, this time approaching the alien minds more carefully. The contact was difficult and disorienting, like trying to have a conversation in a language that had no words. "I'm getting through, but barely. They perceive us as destructive forces that will damage the preserved specimens. They won't release the endeavor unless we can convince them we're trying to help, not harm." The situation grew more urgent as scans showed the endeavor's life support failing faster than predicted. The organic web was apparently interfering with their environmental systems. "We need a demonstration," Morrison said suddenly. "Something that shows our intent to preserve life rather than destroy it." Zara looked at him with growing understanding. "The training simulations. If I can project the concept of protecting innocence, of sacrificing ourselves to save others." Working together, Zara and Morrison crafted a complex psychic message. She projected images and concepts from their training sessions, showing human soldiers putting themselves at risk to protect civilians. Morrison's memories of the Kepler 442 tragedy, his genuine pain at the loss of innocent life, gave emotional weight to the communication. The effect was immediate. The alien ships stopped their predatory circling and began to pulse with different patterns of light. Slowly, carefully, the organic web around the endeavor began to dissolve. "They understand," Zara gasped, the psychic effort leaving her drained. "They're releasing the ship." The rescue proceeded smoothly after that. The alien beings, who called themselves the caretakers, had been attempting to preserve what they saw as a threatened species. Once they understood humanity's own protective instincts, they were eager to cooperate. As the Endeavor's crew was safely transferred to the Valiant, Zara found herself marveling at what they had accomplished. Human determination and ethereal abilities had worked together to solve a problem neither could have handled alone. "That was exceptional work, Princess," Morrison said as they prepared for the journey home. "You've proven yourself a true asset to the team." Zara smiled, but her expression grew thoughtful. "Sergeant, I've been thinking about my future. My time here was supposed to be temporary, a diplomatic formality. But I've learned more in these few weeks than in years of traditional ethereal education." Morrison studied her carefully. "What are you saying, Princess?" "I want to request an extension of my assignment. There's still so much I can learn from human military doctrine, and I believe my people could benefit from understanding your methods better." She paused, gathering her courage. "More than that, I want to formally apply for a position as a liaison officer between our peoples." The suggestion was revolutionary. Ethereal royalty didn't typically seek long-term assignments with other species, especially not in military capacities. But Zara had come to understand that her unique position could serve as a bridge between two very different civilizations. "That's a significant decision," Morrison said carefully. "Are you sure you're ready for the commitment that would entail?" Zara thought about everything she had experienced, the humiliation of her first defeat, the shame of the failed simulation, the discipline Morrison had administered, and the growth that had followed. Most importantly, she thought about the trust that had been placed in her during the rescue mission, and how good it felt to be truly useful. "I'm sure," she said firmly. "But I have one condition," Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Which is? I want to continue training under your supervision. I've learned that accountability and discipline aren't weaknesses to be avoided, but strengths to be cultivated." When they returned to Prometheus Station, Zara immediately requested a private communication with the ethereal High Council. The conversation was long and at times heated, with several council members expressing shock at her request to extend her assignment. "This is most irregular, Princess," came the voice of High Counselor Velith through the quantum communicator. "Your education was meant to provide cursory understanding of human methods, not to fundamentally alter your perspective." "With respect, High Counselor, I believe my perspective needed altering," Zara replied with newfound confidence. "I have discovered that our assumptions about human inferiority were not only wrong, but counterproductive. These beings have much to teach us about cooperation, resilience, and true strength." The debate continued for hours, with Zara patiently explaining everything she had learned. She described Morrison's teaching methods, the importance of discipline and accountability, and the effectiveness of human tactical doctrine. Most importantly, she shared her vision of how ethereal human cooperation could benefit both civilizations. Finally, High Counselor Velith's image flickered with what might have been amusement. "You speak with conviction, Princess. Very well. Your assignment is extended indefinitely, with the understanding that you will serve as our primary liaison with human military forces." The announcement sent ripples of excitement through Prometheus Station. The idea of a permanent ethereal presence, especially one as capable as Zara had proven to be, opened up possibilities for unprecedented cooperation between the species. Commander. Harrison called a formal ceremony to mark the occasion. As Zara stood before the assembled human officers, she wore a unique uniform that combined ethereal design elements with human military insignia. It was a perfect symbol of the bridge she had become. "Today marks a new chapter in human ethereal relations," Harrison announced. "Princess Zara Kethai has proven herself not just as a diplomatic representative, but as a true soldier and teammate." Morrison stepped forward, carrying an ornate case. "Princess, by the authority granted to me by the Terran Defense Force, I hereby award you the Military Cross for exceptional service in the face of hostile action." As he pinned the medal to her uniform, Zara felt tears threatening to spill from her violet eyes. The recognition meant more to her than any royal honors she had received in her previous life. "Thank you, Sergeant," she whispered, "for everything." The weeks that followed, Zara threw herself into her new role with enthusiasm. She developed training protocols that incorporated both human and ethereal methods, creating more effective soldiers than either species could produce alone. Her psychic abilities, disciplined by human military structure, became a powerful tool for reconnaissance and communication. More importantly, her transformation inspired other ethereals to reconsider their assumptions about humanity. Young ethereal officers began requesting assignments to human vessels, eager to learn the lessons Zara had discovered. One evening, as Zara reviewed reports in her new office aboard Prometheus Station, Morrison knocked on her door. "Come in, Sergeant," she called, looking up from her work. "Actually," Morrison said with a slight smile, "I wanted to discuss something with you. My promotion came through. I'll be taking command of a new joint training facility being established on the frontier." Zara felt a stab of something that might have been panic. "Congratulations. When do you leave?" "That depends," Morrison replied, settling into the chair, across from her desk. "I've been authorized to select my own staff. I was hoping you might consider a transfer to serve as my deputy commander." The offer took Zara completely by surprise. Deputy commander of a joint facility would be an enormous responsibility, far beyond anything she had imagined when she first arrived at Prometheus Station as an arrogant princess. "You would trust me with such a position?" she asked quietly. Morrison's expression grew serious. "Zara, you've proven yourself over and over again. You've learned to balance your natural abilities with discipline and teamwork. You've shown courage in the face of danger and wisdom in making difficult decisions. Most importantly, you've demonstrated the kind of leadership that inspires others to be better than they thought possible." Hearing her name spoken without her royal title, hearing Morrison's assessment of her growth and capabilities, Zara felt a profound sense of completion. She had started this journey as Princess Zara Kethai, defined by her birth and her psychic abilities. She was ending it as simply Zara, defined by her actions and her character. "I accept," she said without hesitation. "When do we start?" Morrison smiled, the expression warm and proud. "Pack your things. We ship out next week." As Zara prepared for her new assignment, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this point. She had come to Prometheus Station believing herself superior to the humans she was meant to study. Instead, she had learned that true superiority came not from innate abilities or royal bloodlines, but from dedication, discipline, and the willingness to grow. The discipline Morrison had administered that day in the training bay had been a turning point, showing her for the first time that actions had consequences and that even royalty was accountable for their choices. It had been humbling and painful, but it had also been the beginning of her transformation from a spoiled princess into a true leader. Standing at the viewport in her quarters, looking out at the stars that would soon carry her to new challenges and opportunities, Zara smiled. She had learned the most important lesson of all, that strength came not from standing above others, but from standing beside them, working together toward common goals. The ethereal princess was gone, replaced by something far more valuable: a soldier, a leader, and a bridge between worlds. And it had all begun with a human sergeant who refused to be impressed by royal titles and instead demanded excellence, accountability, and growth. As Zara packed her belongings, she carefully placed Morrison's first lesson plan in her personal files. It would serve as a reminder of how far she had come and how much further she still had to go. The galaxy was vast and full of challenges, but she was ready to face them with the discipline, courage, and wisdom she had learned from the best teacher she could have asked for. The transformation was complete, but the story was just beginning.